We're about to be extremely blessed by the words of Miss Kelly Ivins. Can y'all say, hey, Kelly? Hey, Kelly. Can y'all make her feel at home? Say, you're at home, Kelly. You're at home, Kelly. Okay, good. And she is. So again, as God was getting me to be preparing for this whole season of Lent, this whole passage that it always haunts me. I don't care what time of the year it is. Jesus says in all four Gospels, he looked at whoever's audience was, and he says, to pick up your cross daily and carry it. For whoever wants to really gain their life will lose it. Whoever wants to really follow me, all this stuff that we go, man, Jesus, I don't know if you really understand that sometimes our crosses, and you can fill them in what they are, we don't even want to look at them. We don't even know how to name them. We don't want to pick them up, much less carry them. But it's a way that God says, this is how I'm going to take all that stuff around you and in you, around you, that's not fully whole. And he goes, by this beautiful thing that we don't completely understand called grace, we're going to bring it back together. Okay? And I know that I'm not the only one that has a story about that. So I've strategically selected, and it would have been three. I told Kathy Drew up to put that one in her pocket because, boy, she's got a powerful story for y'all to hear about the crosses and the way that she just lives every day with the grace of God all over her. And Kelly Ivins is another one. As I've gotten to know Kelly, God has crossed our paths for numerous ways, and her beautiful family. And so I offered, and she said, yes. So I want y'all just to listen very carefully as she just shares not only some of the things that have been her crosses that if she would have said, if God would have said, Kelly, this is your choice, she probably said, no, I didn't want to do that. But she's seeing how God's grace has been over every good, bad, and in-between moment in her family's life. So I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to let Kelly share. So y'all welcome Kelly again, please.
Thanks, Pastor, for inviting me to share my story. Last time I shared this story, I didn't wear glasses, so we'll see how this goes here today. This is my story. This is my song. I believe it's vitally important that we share our stories to support each other and encourage one another. So my life verse is 2 Corinthians 1, 3-4. God is our merciful Father and the source of all comfort. He comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we'll be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. And I do know the God of comfort, and I'm so very thankful for that. So my husband and I were married 34 years ago. We were young and in love. Alex was a submarine sailor, and the Navy is the ultimate birth control. After 5 years, we decided the time was right to start a family. We went to Hawaii, where he grew up, and we celebrated our 5-year wedding anniversary and conceived our first baby. It was a wonderful, perfect, storybook time. And we returned home not knowing yet that I was pregnant, and he left for sea. I soon discovered that I was pregnant, but almost immediately started having some complications, and I ended up miscarrying. But then after the miscarriage, I found out that I didn't actually miscarry. What I thought was a miscarriage was a pseudo-sac that was growing in my womb, my uterus. My brain told my uterus that I was pregnant, which I was, so formed a placenta. But my baby was actually an ectopic pregnancy and was trapped in my fallopian tube. So an ectopic pregnancy doesn't make it to the uterus. The baby implants somewhere else in the abdomen, normally the fallopian tube. I needed emergency surgery to save my life, but that would mean aborting our baby's life. Alex had been in and out to sea during this time, but was scheduled to leave again that very day. In the end, he was able to be with me for my surgery and my 5-day hospital stay. I had a full laparotomy, which is like a C-section, and my baby was removed from my fallopian tube. My doctor was able to save my tube. My surgery ended up being in the evening, and in the middle of the night, a very kind nurse by the name of Lisa sat with me, and she fed me ice chips, and she told me about her sister who had an ectopic pregnancy and went on to have children. And she told me I shouldn't lose hope. A day or two later, I asked if Lisa was on duty. I wanted to thank her for her kindness. I was told there wasn't anybody on staff with that name, nor had anyone stayed by my bedside feeding me ice chips. I had entertained an angel unaware. When we were in Hawaii, we purchased a lithograph. It's a picture of a Hawaiian woman. She's holding a baby like this, and you can't see the baby's face. You can see her back, but the mother's face radiates joy. I know that's the joy that will radiate from my face in heaven when I meet the babies who are waiting for me and Alex there. The painting was named Keiki Mili Mili, which is Hawaiian for beloved child, and that is what we named our first child. I stayed with my parents while I recovered and Alex returned to sea. So at this point, I was recovering from major surgery, the loss of a much-wanted baby, the mental anguish of an abortion, and now impaired fertility. I was alone one night, the first time I'd been alone since losing our baby 2 weeks earlier. It was December, and my parents had to go out to do some Christmas shopping. So I spoke on the phone with a close friend who had lost a baby earlier in the year. We cried together, and when we were done, I laid back on the pillows that I had piled behind me. I was physically in a lot of pain, but as I laid back, I felt God's arms literally wrap around me, as if I was leaning back into him. I could feel his arms around me, and I heard him say as plain as day, "Child, I love you. And when you cry, I cry. But I want you to know that I know what the future holds, and I will be with you." He didn't say, "I'm going to give you a baby." He didn't say, "I'm going to give you a child." He said, "I am here and I know." I could go deeper into this part of the story and all that God took me through during that time. But what simply happened in the loss of my first baby and the devastation I felt is that I fell deeply, deeply in love with Jesus. And I'm so thankful for that because it helped me get through the rest of what was going to be my journey. During my time of healing, I dug deep into my Bible and read about what God had to reveal about his love and his understanding of infertility, pregnancy, and loss. In 1 Samuel 1, I read about Hannah, who experienced infertility. And year after year, she would go to the temple and fast and pray. She prayed so urgently that her lips moved, but no sound came out. The priest Eli watched her and thought she must be drunk. He said, "How long are you going to keep coming here drunk?" And she explained she wasn't drunk. Instead, she was deeply troubled and pouring out her soul to the Lord. I read in 2 Samuel 12 about King David's son dying 7 days after birth. But before his son's death, David fasted and prayed for his son's healing. And when he wasn't healed, he accepted it and said that one day he would join him in heaven. I read in John 11:35 that Jesus wept when his close friend Lazarus died, even though he knew he was going to speak him back into life at Lazarus' tomb with the command, "Lazarus, come out." I read about how God understood the depths of grief that come with death, even with knowing what heaven holds for us. The Bible gave me permission to grieve and to understand the love that God felt for me in my grief. It was at that time that the 23rd Psalm became very real to me. God promised to constantly shepherd me. He promised me that night in December that he was there with me. Verse 4 reads, "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect me and comfort me." He promised me that although I had to walk through this valley of the shadow of death, he was not going to leave me there. I was going to get through this to the other side. So I went on. I was told with one ectopic pregnancy, I had about a 20% chance of having another. A little over a year later, I was able to conceive again and have a full-term pregnancy, my precious son, Zachariah. Zachariah means God remembered. God remembered my prayers, and he remembered my pain, and he remembered my tears, and he gave us this beautiful son. About a year and a half later, I conceived again, but this time I had another ectopic pregnancy. This one was different, though. I again had a pseudosac in my uterus that I had surgically removed, but the baby was actually on my ovary instead of in my fallopian tube. It's a very rare occurrence. The baby died on his own, and my body absorbed him naturally. We kind of went with our gut feeling he was a boy, and we named him Trevor, with the Trey part being for our third child. Well, now my odds of having another ectopic pregnancy were getting pretty high, and we started talking about adoption. However, once again, I became pregnant, this time with my beautiful daughter, Chelsea. We lived in Connecticut, in my happy place on the shoreline. Chelsea means placed by the sea. Chelsea was born 9 days after Alex left for a 4-month deployment. I had a dear friend who came to be with me during my delivery. She had OCD, so she was exactly the right person to have with me. She had a job to do, and she was hyper-focused on doing it. God provided me with what and who I needed to get through that time. Alex returned 15 weeks later to meet our daughter Chelsea for the first time. Almost 4 years later, I once again became pregnant. This time with a baby we named Liam, which means determined protector. This baby was also an ectopic pregnancy. By now, though, it had been almost 10 years since my first ectopic pregnancy, and medical technology had improved. Now, a drug called methotrexate was being given to women with ectopic pregnancies. So instead of a full laparotomy or C-section, this drug was given in a shot. And methotrexate is a drug that stops cells from multiplying or growing. So if you're pregnant, this shot stops the baby from growing and he eventually dies. It's an abortion shot. And it was completely devastating. I ended up having 2 rounds of shots because my determined protector, Liam, wouldn't give up so easily. I also went through a very painful miscarriage of the pseudosac. My body insisted on developing once again. It felt like a double whammy. It was Thanksgiving. Well, by now, my odds of having another ectopic pregnancy were up to 80%. And we said, well, this is it. Against all odds, God had given us 2 beautiful children, and we felt so blessed to have them. Our childbearing days were over. But in March 2002, I was pregnant again. This time with twins. 2 babies, 2 sacs in 1 uterus. Miracle upon miracle. So I had some complications, of course, and was put on strict bed rest at 18 weeks. I had to stay in bed 23 hours a day. The other hour was for bathroom visits, showers, and doctor's appointments. Alex, of course, was in and out to sea. I had meals brought in every other day from our church, our homeschool group, and our submarine wives support group. Chelsea was 6 and Zach was 9. It was during that time that we discovered my mom had begun her journey through Alzheimer's. At 22 weeks into the pregnancy, I realized I hadn't felt movement since the day before. I knew something was wrong. I called my doctor and he said to meet him at the hospital. He did an ultrasound and said with relief and a smile, "There's baby B's heartbeat." And then he scanned further, his face dropped, and he said, "I am so sorry. Baby A no longer has a heartbeat." Our daughter Chloe's heart was beating strong, but our daughter Zoe had died in utero. That was Father's Day weekend 2002. Chloe went completely silent for 4 days after Zoe died. before she started moving again. It was a terrifying time with such a relief when I felt Chloe kicking again. So now I was carrying 2 babies, but one had died. The doctors at Yale New Haven Hospital counseled with my doctor and agreed I probably wouldn't make it to 24 weeks, but they hoped it would be enough to give Chloe a fighting chance. Then when I passed that date, they said 26 weeks, then 28 weeks. The doctors couldn't believe I was carrying these babies, continuing to carry them side by side. At 29 weeks, I was put in hospital for a short stay and given shots to mature Chloe's lungs and to prepare for early delivery. My cervix had completely melted away and was being held together by 2 stitches that had been placed in it. The doctor said I was going to deliver soon. I truly believe that God placed his hand right there on my cervix and held me together, because in the end, I made it to 38 weeks. Chloe was born perfect in every way with a loud, robust cry. And Zoe was a beautiful, tiny little baby who quietly was born still. I'd been told by the doctors that after carrying her for 16 weeks, after she had died, that there wouldn't be much left of Zoe to see. They didn't want to give me false hope, but instead she was intact. We could see every bone in her body. She was compressed from being in my uterus, but she was whole. She had the most beautiful lips. We could see her toenails and her fingernails. She was perfect. Alice got her handprint for us to keep. This is a bookmark he made for her memorial service, and this is her actual thumbprint, exact size of my thumb. This handprint's so precious to us because it's proof she existed. I didn't have anything for my 3 ectopic pregnancies because there weren't any ultrasounds or pictures. They weren't in my uterus. But with Zoe, I have ultrasounds and her handprint. So we made it to full term, and it was amazing. But before we delivered was another story. Remember, I said after my first pregnancy, after losing Keiki, I fell so deeply in love with Jesus. That love and that closeness to him had carried me through so much. But this last pregnancy, my twin pregnancy, it wasn't like that. I spent 20 weeks on bed rest, and I found myself feeling like I was falling farther and farther away from God. I mean, I knew he was there intellectually. I knew he was in control and he was there, but I just wasn't feeling it in my heart and in my being like I did with my first loss and my subsequent pregnancies. And I went into a very deep depression. My doctor said I was going through a postpartum depression while still pregnant, since I was carrying one baby who had died and one baby who was still alive and fighting to survive. My hormones were all over the place. So I was put on a safe antidepressant. And my friend drove me up to see a very kind, retired therapist who occasionally still saw people at our church. Dr. Burchell very gently asked me, "Where is God right now?" And I said, I feel like he's on the shore watching me, and I'm being swept down a river by a very swift current, farther and farther away from him, and I can't reach him. I can't even put out my hand to try to get to him. I was completely numb. I felt like I couldn't bond with Chloe because I didn't know if she was going to survive this pregnancy. I didn't know if I was going to survive this pregnancy emotionally. I just kept thinking, I can't do this. I can't do this. I couldn't read my Bible. I just felt completely empty. But the truth is, God will not leave us. He found a way to reach me and speak to me in the midst of my grief and my despair. My dad would call me every day, and he'd ask if he could do anything for me that day. He was so very worried about me. One day I said, yes. Would you stop at the library and pick up this book? Now, for years, the Mitford series was a very popular set of books written by Jan Karon. The story takes place in North Carolina and is about an Episcopal priest in a tiny town full of eccentric people. Everyone who reads these books loves them, except me. Every time I made an attempt to read the first book, maybe 3 or 4 times over the years, I couldn't get past the first few pages. So when my dad asked what he could do for me that particular day, I asked him to pick me up the first book in the Mitford series. See, I truly believe that God protected me from reading these books until he was ready for me to do so. Little did I know, there is scripture gently placed all through these books. And God spoke to me through the scriptures written in a fictional story. The one thing that really spoke to me over and over again was the mention of the prayer that never fails, for God's will to be done. For God's will to be done truly is the prayer that never fails. If you can't pray anything else, you pray for God's will to be done, because that is always perfect. So in my numbness, that's what I prayed. I relinquished the pregnancy completely to him and said, whatever your will is, let it be. Just bring me through this. Please bring me through this. We ended up having a beautiful birth experience as we delivered Chloe and Zoe. We had with us my 2 doctors, one of whom had delivered Zach and Chelsea, and had been with me through 2 of my 3 ectopic pregnancies. There was a glitch in our insurance, and I wasn't able to use him for my pregnancy with Liam and then with the twins. But he saw my name on the board in the hospital when I was there in the 29th week of pregnancy, and he came in to see me, and he promised me that he would be there when I delivered the twins, and he was. I had an incredible bereavement nurse who took care of Zoe so we could focus on Chloe, but then supported us as we held Zoe and spent time with her. We could not have asked for a more tender group of people to help us say hello to Chloe Grace while we said goodbye to Zoe Bell. Zoe Bell literally means beautiful life, while Chloe Grace means blooming or continuing life full of grace. Zoe's name's perfect because her life was beautiful, and one day I will hold her in heaven. And Chloe, well, here she is, growing up so beautiful, and definitely full of grace. We know she has a lot of Zoe in her. We had a beautiful memorial service for Zoe, and we found a new normal in our lives. You know, when you go through something like this, you're never the same. My dad died 3 years after Chloe and Zoe were born. Another twinless twin mom from a support group I'm a member of said to me after my father died, wow, now your dad is the only one who knows both Chloe and Zoe. And how great is our God? That comforted me so much. My dad was so in love with Chloe, and I know how hard it was for him to leave her. He wanted nothing more than to see her grow up. But he knew that wouldn't happen. He was 83 when he passed into heaven. But God gave him Zoe in heaven, Chloe's twin. How amazing is that? That comforted me so much as I mourned my dad's passing. You know, I can't pretend to understand God. His ways are not my ways. I would do things completely different. I'd have 7 children here in church with me today instead of 3. But I'm not God. But this is what I do know. I do know that our God is sovereign. He is in full control and he has a plan. And in his graciousness, he allows my life to be a part of that plan and to be blessed by it. And that completely amazes me. He's given me a deep compassion for others by comforting me many times in supernatural ways I didn't even get to share with you today because of time. He allows me to comfort others. And he brings across my path women who are hurting and share a common bond. And that gives me the opportunity to share with them about God's great love and his amazing healing power. Sometimes we have to look beyond to find where the blessings are. We have to choose to look beyond the pain to see the blessings. It's a choice we have to make. But I do believe that those blessings are there and that God will reveal them to us if we'll just trust him to do so. My song, Blessed Assurance. And that is the song that I just have in my heart so much. As my mother walked through and journeyed through Alzheimer's, we lost her in 2011. As I've now started, this walk through cancer, and all is good. God has just provided so much. So this is my story, and this is my song. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I and my Savior am happy and blessed, watching and waiting, looking above, filled with his goodness, lost in his love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long.
Did you hear brokenness? Did you hear wholeness? Wow. Yes. Did you hear a story? Did you hear a story of somebody by themselves, or did you hear somebody of a story that in those times? I love that question. God, where are you today? Woo! What if we woke up every morning and asked that question, God, where are you today? How would your life be different today? Yes. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Such a blessing. Let's pray. Jesus, we love you. And again, we thank you. We thank you again how your grace just goes beyond any kind of humanistic understanding. God, as we reflect back on that moment in Scripture, Nicodemus came to Jesus at night and said, Jesus, you're this great, wonderful teacher. Tell us, what's all this about? And as Jesus began to talk about this concept of being born again, it was about spiritual things. It was about being a part of this kingdom of God. And Nicodemus couldn't even begin to wrap his mind around what that meant for him in the here and now. So God, as we look at the perception of our reality in the here and now, let our eyes just get beyond the physical things that we see. Let our hearts just be truly open and be changed by the Spirit of God that works in us and through us and around us. And God, allow your beautiful presence, your healing presence, not only to be lived in, but God, to be shared. As Kelly beautifully sung, God, this is our story. It's our story, and we're not alone. We do this with you and we do it with each other. So we give you thanks and we give you praise and we give you all the glory and the honor. We make our prayer in Christ's name. Amen.
Let's stand and sing, He Knows My Name. Before even time began, my life was in His hand. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. I have a Father. He calls me His own. He'll never leave me, no matter where I go. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. He hears me when I call. He hears me when I call.
Thank you. So as we take time just to do some sharing and caring, I know we missed last week being here and tried to get caught up with some folks. What are some things that we need to be sharing this morning as we have this time? Gail, please go ahead.
Linda Hammond-Free's mother is home from the hospital, but she was in the hospital all last week.
Okay.
And I will give to Celeste